All right, welcome in, everybody. Episode 5 of the College Hoop News Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Patelis. Tonight, we'll be breaking down the Big Ten. Myself and my guests will give you all our thoughts on the league, team breakdowns, and we'll give you our picks at the end of tonight's episode. So let me bring in my guest host tonight, Sean Bock. Sean's writing for a lot of different outfits these days, BT Powerhouse, Student U Sports. Also, check him out on Zag's blogs. Sean's very knowledgeable on the Big Ten, so I thought it'd be a good idea to bring him in tonight. And also follow him on Twitter, definitely, Sean_Bock_4. Sean, what's up, man? How are you?
Hey, Tony, how are things going?
I am very good. How are you?
That's good. College has been great so far. Even better that college hoops is coming around, and especially we'll be covering the Big Ten tonight, so I'm excited to get into it.
Me too. So obviously, too, just let you guys know, Sean will be on the podcast, I'm sure, quite a bit this year when we do our weekly recaps every week. So definitely look out for that. All right, so let's get into it right away, Sean. Big Ten coming off a pretty solid year, 7 NCAA bids, 3 teams advanced to the Sweet 16, Purdue, Michigan, Wisconsin. You know, the league was pretty much missing an elite team last year in conference. That was the big dig on the league. Still got 7 bids, but this year I think it'll be different. You know, Michigan State's looking like an elite team. Minnesota, Purdue are ranked pretty high in preseason rankings. What's your take on the league this year, and do you think it'll be better than last year?
Well, I mean, up top, you definitely have more consistent talent, obviously with Michigan State, Minnesota, all that. But for me, I think the league is separated into 3 tiers. You have the first tier, which is Michigan State. They're in a league of their own. You got a second tier, which I would say is Minnesota, Northwestern, Purdue, and then maybe Iowa or Maryland something. I don't know. Those two are kind of on the edge, but, you know, I have a slight bias, so I might put Iowa in there. And then you got the rest of the conference, which is kind of – it's just a whole mess. I mean, you have teams at the bottom, obviously, like Ohio State, Nebraska, Rutgers, maybe even Illinois, Indiana, all those teams. You can kind of interchange them a little bit, but you obviously have the first with Michigan State, and then those teams who could make it to the NCAA tournament. Then you have that bottom, those last 2 teams that can make it to the NCAA tournament. So I think that's what's going to make this conference really interesting. Obviously, on any given night, I think those bottom teams, maybe even a Rutgers, can knock off a top team like Minnesota, Northwestern, Purdue if they come to their place. But, I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun this year in the conference. There's a lot of interesting upperclassmen, a lot of talent all around. I really like the sophomore class in this conference with guys like Bridges, all the Michigan State guys, Amir Coffey too. I think it's just going to be a really fun year. I'm excited to get going.
Yeah, for sure. And like we said earlier, you know, Michigan State looks to me like a national title contender, absolutely loaded in that front court for especially. And I totally agree with you on the tiers. You know, like you said, Michigan State, I think, is a level above everybody else. Then you got like 2 through 4 or 5. I'm interested in the middle of the league, like Maryland, Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin. Kind of have some question marks, you know, with Wisconsin, even Indiana, with the new coach and Archie Miller. Do you like those teams in the middle, like Michigan, Indiana, and Wisconsin? What's your take on those guys? Do you think those guys are NCAA tournament teams?
I would say if I had to pick out of those 3 teams, Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, I would say Michigan has the best chance. Wisconsin, I know they're very consistent. They haven't missed an NCAA tournament, God knows how many years. But I don't know with this team. I mean, Khalil Iverson, Ethan Happ definitely have a lot to put on their shoulders this year. And I don't know. I don't trust Ethan Happ. I mean, we'll get into a full breakdown Wisconsin later on in the pod, but I don't know. I don't know if I can trust Ethan Happ leading the team. I mean, I know he's been developing multiple types of his scoring on his offense this year, on this offseason, but I don't know. He's too inconsistent of a free throw shooter for me to really rely on him to do a lot on this team, and I'm not sure what guys they have coming in. I mean, Khalil Iverson's a good player. Dimitri Trice is solid. But I don't know as a whole. I like Greg Gard as a coach, but it's going to be interesting to see because, I mean, these are his players that he's bringing in now. No more Bo Ryan's players. These are his players, and it'll be interesting to see how that whole program shapes out.
For sure. Again, like I'm just interested in that middle of the pack to see who rises to the top there. All right, so let's get into our team by team breakdowns, and we'll definitely talk about more of Wisconsin later in the podcast tonight. So first up tonight, we're going to talk about Illinois. You know, John Groce, the John Groce era is over in Champaign. 4th year in a row, they missed the NCAA tournament last year. not so surprising he got he got let go. Looking ahead though, I thought it was an absolute home run hire, snagging Brad Underwood from Oklahoma State. This guy has proven he can coach it at a high level. What he did at Oklahoma State last year. He's also a really good recruiter. He's already made a big impact at Illinois on the recruiting trail. This year's group, does have some solid pieces, but I don't think many are expecting much. But I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if they're a little bit better than anticipated, just because of the impact of Underwood. I think he's that good a coach. What's your thoughts on the Illini this year, Sean?
Well, I mean, being from Illinois and surrounded by Illinois fans, I know a lot of people that are really excited about this Brad Underwood hire. I mean, he's known for his offense at Oklahoma State. They were one of the best offensive teams in the year in the NCAA last year, which is definitely some excitement. Their defense was a little bit which was kind of Illinois' problem last year as well. I mean, Illinois had a lot of problems last year, but that seemed to be their biggest one. But I mean, he brings back some talent. I mean, in the front court, LaRon Black, who really hasn't broken out, really hasn't been the player Illinois fans expected him to be when he came to Champaign. Then Michael Finke, a guy who can kind of spread out the floor. His brother, who is a senior, this is more recruiting stuff, but he could be a big get for Brad Underwood, which would give him a lot of momentum. But I mean, the storyline for this year is who's going to replace Malcolm Hill, one of the best players in Illinois history, gone due to graduation. They pick up Mark Allstork, transfer from Wright State. He will be a great scoring boost for them. Tajon Lucas will be replacing Tracy Abrams at the point. Tajon Lucas looked very good in his freshman season. Illinois controlling the offense, running the show. He should be solid this year. But the one thing I want to point out is this freshman class. Mark Smith, obviously the big name, top 100 recruit. He was kind of a no-name. I mean, he was a baseball commit to Missouri or something like that. And then he broke out, and he's going to be a great college player. He's going to be a great scorer at the two guard. Him and Allstark will be fun to watch. Trent Frazier, more of a point guard type. He'll definitely develop. Him and Tajon Lucas, it'll be interesting to see how they split up the minutes. Then DeMonte Williams, who's more of a forward type player, I think, like forward guard, yeah, he'll be interesting to see how he develops. And I just think the real problem for them is going to be defense.
Right.
If they can get the defense going, I mean, I know Brad Underwood puts a real emphasis on their offense. It'll be interesting to see if they can really work their defensive game, and maybe they could be a sleeper in the Big Ten this year around that 8-9 range. But as of now, I'm probably going to put them around 11-12. But I think they could be a team that could sneak up on some people this year.
Yeah, for sure. I have them at 10. I thought that's a good spot for them preseason. I think regardless, I think they'll be an exciting team to watch. They're going to score a lot of points, obviously. One guy you mentioned, Michael Finke, I think he's going to work really well in this system. I think he's going to have a big year. I think LaRon Black, maybe this is the year that he finally puts things together, because he's going to be a vocal point of this team, obviously, with all the newcomers and whatnot. Allstork, I thought, was one of the more unheralded kind of transfer pickups this offseason. I mean, this kid averaged 19 points a game, 4 rebounds, 3.5 assists at Wright State. So if he can make an impact and kind of be that replacement for, Malcolm Hill, that obviously would be a key for them. Also, the other guy I wanted to ask you about, I'm kind of excited about, and some other people I talked to as well, Kipper Nichols. Do you think he could make a bigger impact for them this year?
I mean, he played how much did he play last year? Like 13 minutes a game. Yeah, I mean, I saw him play a couple times last year. He seems like a solid rotation player. I mean, that forward position, their wings are kind of in depth. So it'll be interesting to see if he could step up. I mean, I think he could provide a scoring boost and defensive boost. So I mean, that'll be interesting because they really don't have any wings, and we'll see. I think he could probably sneak into that rotation one way or another.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that they're going to, if they want to get, if they want to surprise people this year, they're going to need contributions from their freshmen. I mean, I think all 4 of those guys you mentioned, 3 guys, Smith, Williams, Frazier, those guys are going to need to play, and they're going to need to play well if they want to creep up the standings. Right now, I would probably say they're no better than an NIT team. And I think defense is obviously a major issue, like you said. So you said you had Illinois where in the rankings? Probably
like 10 or 11, somewhere
10 or
around
11.
there.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good spot for them. And again, I mean, Underwood is that good a coach where I could see them, surprising and maybe finishing a little bit higher than anticipated. So look out for Illinois this year. I'm sure everybody's excited in Champaign with the new head coaching hire. So, all right, up next, Indiana, coming off a very underwhelming year. They were 18-16, 7-11 in conference, and they got an NIT bid, and they were, outed really quick against Georgia Tech. So another team with a new coach. Tom Crean got let go this offseason. Archie Miller steps in from Dayton, which I thought was another great move. He's already making an impact on the program recruiting trail. They have a great 2018 class coming in. I think they have like 5 4-star guys next year. So focusing in on this year, though, I don't love this roster, but like Underwood at Illinois, I wouldn't be shocked if they overachieve a little bit because of Miller, who's a really, really good coach. What's your thought on Indiana?
Well, I mean, you said it. Indiana has a great hype. There's so much hype around this program right now, especially what Archie's done on the recruiting trail. But as for this season, the keys are going to be Rob Johnson and Juwan Morgan. Obviously, Juwan Morgan, not the most talented player on the team, but he might have to be the best player on the team, meaning he's going to have to do the dirty work. He's going to have to find ways to score inside and really expand his game to outside, which, I mean, he showed promise his freshman year. He only shot a couple threes, but last year he tried to expand his game, and he was like 25%, like 10 of 40 from 3, which is not good. And if he's going to want to be an offensive threat, he's going to have to be able to develop that outside game. So that'll be a key for him. And then Rob Johnson, who also didn't play that well last year, he has to step up and be that guy at the point guard. I mean, Indiana struggled last year. I mean, they had a lot of struggles, but the number one thing was their point guard. They didn't have a consistent play, and Rob Johnson really needs to cut down on those turnovers this year. So Indiana could really run through their offensive sets. I mean, their biggest issue last year, it was almost brutal to watch them play offense last year because they were turning the ball over so much. Him and Josh Newkirk will have to step up. The one thing that concerns me about Josh Newkirk is he was a backup at Pitt for a reason. So, I mean, him coming over, he showed flashes. I mean, he scored like 24 and 27 in back-to-back games last season, which is great and all. I think it was against like Penn State and then someone else. I forget who, but he showed promise last year. He could be good this year, but I mean, I don't feel comfortable with him at the guard position. I don't think I ever will, but I mean, it is what it is. Him and Rob Johnson will be definitely controlling that backcourt. And then I think the real key this year for Indiana will actually be De'Ron Davis down low. He showed glimpses of talent last year, taking over when Thomas Bryant went down with injury, when he just was struggling. Crean would put in Davis for kind of that boost. He was a great low post player, had great moves, great footwork, everything. I mean, he was a little overweight last year, but he made a priority this summer to cut that down, and he's made great improvements from what I've heard. So he'll definitely be a player to watch down low. And the one guy I can't wait to watch is freshman Clifton Moore. NBA draft experts are saying he's one of the best long-term projects in the freshman class right now, which is saying a lot because he was a top like 200 recruit or something like that in the high 100s, which is interesting considering Indiana is known for getting those guys who aren't the most highly touted recruits, but then come in, develop, and become great players. And that could be Clifton Moore. He's a 6'10", 200-pound, lengthy kid from Pennsylvania. He's a shooter, can run the floor, is growing into his body, still needs to put on some muscle, but I've heard nothing but great things from the coaching staff and all the media and players and stuff. So it'll be exciting to see him develop into a player, and I think he could contribute a little bit this year, along with other freshmen, Al Durham and Justin Smith. But as a whole, I think Indiana, I think they could – obviously they have the benefit of Assembly Hall. Indiana fans love their basketball. There's going to be a couple games where they're going to look like they can compete at the top of the Big Ten. There's going to be some games where they look like they don't even belong on the floor. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how things go throughout the year. Archie Miller obviously knows what he's doing, but I think in the end they'll probably be same with Illinois, probably that 9, 10, 11 range. I could see them knocking off a team like maybe Minnesota or Northwestern at home, but in the end I think they're going to be that lower tier.
Yeah, definitely. Excellent take, Sean. I really agree with pretty much everything you said. What I had down was pretty much the same as you. Point guard play needs to be better. I mean, Newkirk was pretty much a big disappointment last year. Defense, they were 207th in the country in defense. I think Archie Miller will help that. I think they'll be a little bit better. I think another key that you didn't mention that I think will be good for this team is Colin Hartman returns.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's not a big, production contribution in that way, but just leadership, on the floor, communication, all that good stuff. And he's definitely a leader. So I think that's key. The problem with this team is they don't have an all Big Ten guy on this roster, in my opinion. I like Robert Johnson, but I just don't think he's that level of player. Jawan Morgan and Deron Davis could be, but not this year. I think that's more a future type thing. So I have them at 8. I have them right above Wisconsin. I thought that's a decent spot for them because I think, again, like Archie Miller can make an impact on this team, and they could maybe overachieve a little bit because he's that good a coach. So definitely defense and point guard place for me seems to be the big issue. Where do you have them? If you put them, what do you think?
Yeah, like you said, with the addition of Hartman, that will definitely be a benefit. He was a leader, and he was a big reason why they made it to the NCAA tournament, had such a good year. But I think with him coming back, they could probably be around that 9-10 range.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. All right, so let's move on tonight. Up next is Iowa. Honestly, the Hawkeyes, in my opinion, are one of the more exciting teams, young teams per se in college basketball. They return pretty much everyone except Peter Jock, as we know. That's obviously a tough guy to replace, averaged 19.9 points a game last year. But I think they're in really good shape. I think Tyler Cook is a guy that is future all Big Ten, maybe even this year. They have one of the best point guards in the conference in Jordan Bohannon. This roster is really deep, in my opinion, really versatile. What's your take on your future alma mater?
Future alma mater, yeah. They'll be good this year, no doubt. I know the buzz around Iowa City is, football season hasn't really gone to plan, but basketball season's on the horizon, and a lot of people are excited. You said it, that super sophomore class, Jordan Bohannon, Tyler Cook, then there's a couple more, Cordell, Isaiah Moss, Ryan Kriener too, who wasn't really a stud last year, but he provided good minutes. That whole class is going to be solid. And last year was kind of the rebuilding year with Jock, and he's the only guy they lose, so they bring back around 80% of their scoring, if my math's correct. There's a lot to be excited about. Bohannon's poised to have a great year. Tyler Cook showed promise of being an NBA draft prospect. I know someone told me the other day that this could be Tyler Cook's probably the best NBA draft prospect that Hawkeyes have had in like 10 or 15 years or something like that. So that's definitely another reason to be excited. But I think the real player that stands out, I know your boy Johnny Rothstein is very high on him. Luka Garza, freshman from Washington, D.C., top 150 player. He's in my social media today class. He's an absolute body. I'm telling you, he is a man-child. He's going to be very good this year down low. It'll be interesting to see if he starts the year. They have an exhibition game coming up that I'll be at on Friday that we'll see if he starts or not. It's an exhibition game. McCaffrey's going to probably try and get multiple guys in, try and empty the bench a little bit. But it'll be interesting to see how big of a role he plays this year. I'm expecting him to start, considering Iowa doesn't really have a true 5 who can kind of stretch the floor and finish down low like he can. So that'll be something to look out for. And then another freshman, Jack Nunge, 6'10", something around there from Indiana. He's a guy. He can finish down low. He's decent post player, but I think what he's going to be best at Iowa is stretching the floor and shooting from the perimeter. So that freshman class, McCaffrey has his son too, Connor, who's redshirting this year. He was a top 100 player, combo guard. But this whole team is going to be really solid, that young group. And then you got the seniors, Nicholas Baer, 6th man of the year last year in the conference. He's not sure if he's going to start or not this year, but he said he doesn't really care, whatever helps the team. That's the Iowa basketball mentality right there, and that's going to be the thing that kind of drives this team, considering there's going to be no best player. You could make an argument that Tyler Cook's going to put up, 16-7 or 16-8 every night. But the real mentality of this team is there's going to be no one player. This team, there's so much depth on the roster, especially at the front court, which might be an area for concern. But overall, I think with this Iowa team, what's going to make them great is how well they can get down on defense, because, I mean, that was their big struggle last year, and how well they can distribute the ball with one another. Because as with a team that has really no superstars, especially with the departure of Jock, it'll be interesting to see if they can distribute the ball and know one man over the other and play well as a team together.
Right. I was going to mention defense. They were 299th last year in defense. They gave up 78 points a game. So that's definitely a big issue. And if they can figure that out on the defensive end, and if Luke Garza, I feel like he might be an X factor for this team, because they have all the pieces. Okay. They have a point guard. They have a stud in Tyler Cook, possibly. They have a glue guy in Nick Bear, like a do-it-all guy. And if Garza can be that big guy in the middle, I mean, that's all the makings of a really, really good team. And I feel like this is a legit top 5 team in the Big Ten. Like, obviously, the defense needs to get better, but they're just so deep. I mean, they have so many guys to go to. I mean, some of these guys aren't going to play many minutes, and these are some solid players. Brady Ellingson, Ahmad Wagner, Dom Ewell. Like, these guys are role players that might not see the floor much because they have so many guys to go to on the floor. So I have them at 5. Where would you put them if you had to pick them right now in the rankings?
I would say I put them at 4 or 5, kind of interchanging with Purdue. I think they're kind of similar rankings-wise, but yeah, I would say I put them at 4 or 5. All
right. So definitely excited about Iowa. Probably one of my top teams. I've talked them up a lot this offseason on Twitter. So hopefully they can figure things out on defense and make another run to the NCAA tournament. They've been there 3 out of the last 4 years. So Fran McCaffrey's obviously done a really good job with this group. All right, up next, we're going to talk about Maryland. So, Mark Turgeon has done such a good job with this program, especially since joining the Big Ten. Last 3 years, they won 28, 27, and 24 games. 1 second-place finish, 2 third-place finishes. This year I think they'll be pretty good, but I kind of see them in that 4 to 6 range this year. The top of the league, as we know, is just so good. So I don't know if they can creep up to that 1, 2, or 3 spot. Starts with that sophomore trio, Kevin Herter, Anthony Cowan, Justin Jackson. All 3 of those guys to me are all Big Ten type, players. The question for me is, do they have enough around those guys to compete near the top? They lose some really key pieces, obviously Melo Trimble, DeMonte Dodd, who I think was an underrated guy last year. He played really well for them. So can the guys in the front court improve? Michael Tchaikovsky, Ender as well. Those guys were solid role players, but I think they're going to need a little bit more from them this year. Because I don't think you can rely on, at this point, I'm not going to rely on a guy like Dion Wiley or Jared Nickens. I just don't know how much you can get from those guys. So they can stay healthy up in the front court and, be consistent. I think they're still an NCAA tournament team. What do you think about Maryland?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Iowa, there's a lot of congestion up there in the front court. I mean, you have Tchaikovsky, Bender, Tomaic, redshirt freshman, Sean Obi, a Duke transfer, Bruno Fernando, and Jared Nickens, who you could probably play like a small forward, power forward type. But yeah, it all starts with that freshman trio with Justin Jackson, who a lot of people are saying could be all Big Ten first team player this year. He's a really great scorer, athletic, can play defense. He'll definitely have a big year. Kevin Huerter played with the U19 team this summer in Egypt. He showed great promise coming off the bench. Solid shooter, just a solid all-around player. And then Anthony Cohen, who's probably going to have to take over the guard spot with Trimble being gone. The thing that's going to be big for them this year is how are they going to replace Trimble? Obviously, they have Cohen, who can run the show, but I mean, when you have a guy like Trimble leave your program, I mean, it's almost similar to Indiana and Yogi Ferrell in a way. You have a guy that you're so used to running the show, so used to really controlling everything. How are you going to be able to replace that? Obviously, Indiana struggled last year, but I think Anthony Cohen can do a good job. He'll probably have some growing pains at first, but I think in the end he'll be a solid candidate to fill this job. And I think the real question is going to be, can the backcourt keep up with the depth and the probably solid production that the front court's going to have? I mean, all those guys, Maryland's bound to be able to dominate down low with this group. I mean, Huerter and Jackson are going to provide great scoring from the outside. The real question is going to be, can this backcourt keep up, and can this backcourt really be the difference in them, making them a second weekend team in the NCAA tournament or a one-and-done team in the NCAA tournament?
Right. I think a guy like Darryl Morsell, 4-star out of Baltimore, I think he gives them some depth in that backcourt as well. He's a tough kid, defender. He also can rebound pretty well. So I think he makes an impact as well. But again, for me, it comes back to the front court. Can Kukovsky, Bender, and those guys you mentioned. I think Obi will probably be more of a role player. Give them a few minutes a game. Bruno Fernando is kind of an exciting about. Who do you think is going to be the offensive centerpiece of this team? Do you think it'll be Jackson, Huerter? Who would it be in your opinion?
I mean, based off of last year, I would say Jackson. I think Huerter is more of a catch and shoot kind of guy from the perimeter. I'm not sure how great he is at creating his own shot, and I think Jackson's a little more athletic when it comes to that. When either it's creating his own shot or really just overall athletic, and that makes a difference for sure. So I think I'd have to go with Jackson right now. I mean, it could change obviously when the season starts and all that, but if I had to pick one now, I'd say it'd be Jackson.
Yeah, I would too. I think he can do a little bit more on the offensive end. Like you said, Herter's more of a catch and shoot guy. I have them at 6. Is that a little too low for you?
I would put them at 7. I think Michigan gets the upper hand on them.
Really? That's interesting. All right, well, we'll get to Michigan right now. Michigan's up next. Big Ten tournament champs last year. They kind of turned it on late last season, had a great run in the Big Ten tournament, had a great run in the NCAA tournament. Now Michigan is a team I'm kind of up and down on. Definitely intriguing though. You lose Derek Walton, who to me was one of the best players in college basketball late last season. I mean, he was unbelievable in that stretch rundown late in the season. Zach Irvin's also gone. DJ Wilson is a kid who really raised his game late last season as well. So that's a lot of holes to fill. But, Mo Wagner, he looks to be one of the better bigs in college basketball. He's back. Abdur Rahman also returns. He's a tough kid. I think he can be a capable guy, maybe give you a game. And then you have some really interesting newcomers. Charles Matthews, Kentucky transfer. He might be the X factor for this team, in my opinion. He's going to play a big role. Ohio grad transfer, Jerron Simmons is a guy I really like. I think he can maybe fill in for Derek Walton. He averaged 16 and 6.5 at Ohio last year, grad transfer. Concerns I have for this team, though, depth is one, especially up front. Who spells Wagner? I'm not really sure. I kind of never count out Michigan, though, because of John Beilein. He's one of the best coaches in the country. So what's your thoughts on this Wolverine team?
Yeah, I mean, this team is definitely talented, and they have pieces that fit well together. But like you said, the depth is going to be a big issue. I mean, you're right. Who's going to back up Mo Wagner? I mean, Wagner definitely came on towards the end of the year, at least to the general college basketball fan. Really, he was an absolute monster. I think he's going to continue that. He seemed very excited from what he said at Big Ten Media Day about returning to Michigan, which is always a good sign because you have some of those guys that seem hesitant about returning, but he seems certain that he's going to have a big year this year and that the return to Michigan will be worth it. So it'll be fun to watch him this year. And then the transfers, obviously. Charles Matthews from Kentucky. I mean, this kid's no fluke. He didn't play much at Kentucky, but he got recruited by Kentucky in some of the top programs. I mean, I saw him in high school play a couple times, and he's athletic, very athletic, does everything. I mean, and by everything, I mean everything. He can rebound, plays defense, plays offense, can shoot from the perimeter, can finish. He'll definitely be a good player. He'll fit well in that system, I think. I think he could be almost a player like a Zach Irvin type player, except Zach was a little bit more on the offensive end. I think Charles will be able to play both ends, and he's a little more he plays within himself more, which is always a good thing, so he doesn't get too ahead of himself. Jerron Simmons will be looking to replace Derek Walton. I've heard good things about him. Can score a little bit, can distribute everything. He'll be fun to watch. Then Duncan Robinson also returns, a solid shooter from the outside and just more bodies down low. Isaiah Livers, he was a Michigan Mr. Basketball, the first one since Manny Harris at the Wolverines picked up. He'll be more depth down low, 6'7". He can score a little bit too, which is always good. And then Abdur Rahman, another option at the point guard position. Xavier Simpson as well, who showed flashes last year. And I think a player on this team that could really be an X factor coming off the bench is freshman Jordan Poole. He played at La Lumiere last year with guys like Jaren Jackson, Brian Bowen, Tiger Campbell. Poole is a top 50 recruit, I believe. I know he's a top 100 for sure, but he's a great shooter from the outside, and he'll provide a great scoring boost because with those point guards like Simmons, Rahman, and Simpson, they'll be able to attack, and then Poole will be sitting on the perimeter, chucking them threes, nailing them all day. And I think he'll definitely be a good player to watch and someone who Big Ten players should definitely keep an eye on as he develops into a great player. So, I mean, like I said earlier, the depth is an issue for this team. It'll be interesting to see how they go about it, especially at the front court spot. But I'm not ready to count out John Beilein. I mean, I have in past years, and it's kind of bit me in the butt. But in the end, I think Michigan will probably be – I think they'll be an NCAA tournament team, but almost similar to Maryland. I think they're kind of interchangeable in a way. I could see them being a one-and-done team, and then based on matchups, I could see them being a second weekend team. So it'll be interesting to see how they pan out. But I like their chances with Beilein.
Yeah, me too. I've kind of come around on Michigan earlier this offseason. I wasn't as high on them as I am now. They're a lethal perimeter shooting team. I mean, they're a legit top 10, top 15 perimeter shooting team in college basketball. So that always is a major X factor for me. They were not a good rebounding team last year, so I think they definitely have to improve on that, especially Mo Wagner. He only averaged 4.5 rebounds a game last year. He's got to get better down low. But having a stretch big like him in college basketball is such a weapon. He's so exciting to watch. So, if he can be, an elite, big, I think Michigan's in great shape. But I'm going to keep them at 7. I like Maryland a little bit more, but I mean, I think, like you said, they're interchangeable. So where would you put Michigan right now?
Yeah, probably that 6-7 range. I think them and Maryland are very similar. I don't know. It's kind of tough, but yeah, I'd say 6 or 7.
All righty. So again, exciting year for Michigan. I'm really excited about Charles Matthews and Simmons. I think both those guys are going to be fun to watch. So let's move on to Michigan State. So as we mentioned in the intro, the Big Ten really lacked an elite team last year. So this year it looks to be Michigan State in many people's opinions. With Bridges, he shocks everyone by returning. So having him back makes all the difference. It probably puts them from a top 20 team to now a top 5 team. So many things kind of went wrong for them last year. They lose Ben Carter and Gavin Schilling preseason to injuries. Bridges also missed time with injuries last year. Aaron Harris, before being injured, never really lived up what people thought he would at Michigan State. But looking at this year's club, there's so many pieces to like. This team is loaded in the front court. I mean, you have Nick Ward, Jaren Jackson, Kenny Goins, Carter, Schilling. They have so many options Tom Izzo can go to. And in the backcourt, I really like Cassius Winston. He looks to be, one of those breakout candidates. I really like this group. What's your take on the Spartans?
I mean, it all starts with Miles Bridges, obviously. I mean, him coming back was absolutely huge for this program. I think Tom Izzo, if he wants to win a national championship anytime soon, it's got to be this year. He's not getting any younger. The team, I don't know if Miles Bridges is going to come around Michigan State. I could be wrong, probably will be wrong, but I think Miles Bridges is going to be an absolute stud this year. There's no doubt, and he has plenty of guys around him that will make him better. I mean, I said it earlier in the podcast. This sophomore class in the whole conference is going to be absolutely incredible, and it's no different right here with Michigan State. I mean, you have Bridges, Cassius Winston, who people are saying around the program that he's the best passer since Magic Johnson at Michigan State. Nick Ward, who showed progress last year, almost like Darren Davis in a way, needs to kind of cut down a little bit and be a little bit of more of a needs to just improve his stamina, and then he'll be a great player. And then Josh Langford, I've heard great things about him in the offseason. Obviously, he was a top 50 recruit coming into last year. He wasn't that great. Kind of was inconsistent, looked kind of hesitant at times. I've heard great things about how he's developed over the offseason. And then the front court, too. with injuries and stuff, with Carter, Schilling, all those guys going down. It sucked for them, but I mean, them coming back ready off this injury, I think those guys will be very dominant down low, very intimidating. They're going to have a really big lineup with those guys, and then Miles Bridges at the small forward, and then Josh Langford, who's kind of lengthy at the 2 guard, 6'4", 6'5", and then obviously Cassius Winston or Tum Tum there at the point. So that'll be really interesting for them. And then Jaren Jackson too, who, in my opinion, is probably going to be freshman of the year. McDonald's All-American, can stretch the floor, fits perfectly, perfectly into this Michigan State offense and this team in general. I mean, you have guys like Carter and Schilling who can pound it down low, are bruisers, and then you have a guy like Jackson who can also do that. Kind of needs to have a little more mentally, needs to be a little more mentally strong to really compete down low, but his strength is from the outside, 15 feet beyond, very versatile, can run the floor. This team will be very quick, and I think he fits into that mold perfectly. A lot of people are saying national champions. I don't like giving my take on national champions this early on in the year, especially because there's no matchups. There's no real matchups yet with the NCAA tournament, and injuries like what happened last year with Michigan State. I just don't like it. I just don't like saying who win national championship. I could see a scenario where Michigan State would win it if they stay healthy. They get good matchups in the NCAA tournament. Miles Bridges stays consistent, plays within himself, doesn't try to do too much like he did at times last year. But I think Michigan State, out of all the teams in the Big Ten, have the best chance of winning the national championship, no doubt.
Yeah, and I think this year's team, unlike last year's team, will be better equipped to deal with injuries. Obviously not Bridges if he goes down for a long time, but, if somebody else were to go down, they have so much depth that I think they'll be okay for a long period of time. Jackson is the guy, that I'm excited about. He's a rim protector, good footwork, he can score. He can do a lot of things for this team. There's going to be guys on this roster that I don't think see much time that are solid Big Ten players, like a guy like Matt McQuaid. I think Kenny Goins as well. Like, I don't know how much time those are guys going to see because they just have have so much depth. So I have them number one, obviously, in the conference. I'm sure you do too. Yeah. I think they're a top 3 team in college basketball going into this season. So I think they're, like we said in the intro, a level above everybody else in the Big Ten. So it should be exciting. This is definitely one of the best teams Tom has always had. And a guy I just wanted to mention real quick is Josh Langford. You said he was pretty inconsistent last year. He was a 5-star guy. He didn't really pan out. Imagine if he turns into the player we think he is. I mean, that just, so the sky's the limit for this team. So I'm very excited about Michigan State this year. All right, so let's move on here, Sean. We got Minnesota up next. The Gophers were a huge surprise last season. I and many people pegged them for, I think around 500. I thought they'd win like 15 games, but what a great job by Richard Pitino. Did a really good job with this group. Looking ahead to this season, they're not going to sneak up on anybody, obviously. This is a legit top 20 team. I think I have them at 14 in my poll. They have pretty much all their production back from last season. They do lose Akeem Springs. He averaged 9.5. He was a leader for them. So another hit though they took was Eric Curry. He tore his ACL, guy in the front court. I thought he was going to be a breakout guy, so I'm definitely kind of worried about that depth up front now. But I still think this is a really good team. Reggie Lynch is a beast up front. They have Mason, Coffey, Lynch, McBrayer, Jordan Murphy's a really talented kid. Then you add like Isaiah Washington, a 4-star New York kid. So I think this is a Big Ten championship team. I really do. What do you think about the Gophers, Sean?
Yeah, I think they're going to be very talented this year. But the thing for me is, obviously, like you said, they snuck up on some people last year, and I heard something the other day. It's going to be how are they going to react to the pressure of being the hunted instead of hunting? So I mean, there's a lot of pressure on them. Expectations are high. I know a lot of media members have been asking Pitino, like, how are you guys going to react now that you guys are projected to be one of the top teams in the Big Ten? And last year you were projected not so great, which will be interesting to me. I mean, they bring back plenty of guys. Nate Mason, he's going to be an X factor this year. Obviously a great scoring guard. Could get a little better when it comes to creating opportunities for others. He tries to do a little bit too much sometimes. Didn't have the greatest shooting percentages last year, but he's definitely a talented player and will be a key facet at the point guard position. Then you have Amir Coffey, another standout sophomore, kind of similar to Miles Bridges in how he can do a little bit of everything, and he's pretty big for kind of a guy who can dribble and distribute like a point guard, but he'll definitely be a fun player to watch this year. And then Reggie Lynch is the most intimidating big man in the Big Ten. Blocks literally everything that comes near him. He's definitely going to be a beast. Devontae Fitzgerald, another guy in the front court who can hold it down, Texas A&M transfer. He'll be solid. And then Jordan Murphy, someone I'm very high on, scored 24 points in the secret scrimmage against Creighton the other day. I mean, I know those scrimmages don't mean much, but I mean, when he scores 24 points against a team like Creighton, you gotta think pretty positive about this guy. So I mean, he's definitely going to be a good player to watch. I think this Minnesota team, plus with the addition of Isaiah Washington, who could back up Mason at the point. Isaiah, obviously a typical New York guard, very tough mentally, great game, very shifty, can score, assist, anything, very flashy. He's a very solid player for this team. I think he fits this Minnesota program philosophy very well. I think this year, Minnesota, I could see an instance where they could sneak up a little bit on Michigan State, but I think Sparty's too much. Any other year, I could see Minnesota being the top team in the Big Ten, fighting for that top spot. But with the talent of Sparty, I think they're probably going to be number 2 in the conference.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have them at number 2 as well. The one thing I wanted to ask you about, with Reggie Lynch, as good as he is, a lot of foul trouble last year. And now the fact that Eric Curry is out for the year, are you concerned about that, in that front court? Because, Bakari Kanate he's a solid player. He's a role player. He's not a guy who's going to give you production. His role expands now because if Lynch gets into foul trouble, that might be an issue for Minnesota. What's your thoughts on that front court problem?
Yeah, that's a very major concern. I mean, I know Richard Pitino has harped in media day and stuff that they've been working on him staying down on his feet, not trying to block, literally like trying to be too aggressive when it comes to blocking, kind of stay within himself and know when he can use his arms and not use his body. So, I mean, you're right, that's a very high concern if I were Pitino and them. I mean, we saw last year against bigger teams, they kind of struggled because when Lynch would get into foul trouble, which he did often, they started to fall a little bit and really see an impact without Lynch down low.
Yep, definitely the main concern for me this year is that front court depth. So, but Minnesota, again, really good team. I had them at number 2, just like you do. So, big year for the Gophers, possibly. All right, up next, we're going to talk about Nebraska. The Cornhuskers are coming off another rough year, obviously. Unfortunately, I don't think things change this year. And I think Tim Miles, who I still think is a pretty good coach, he's not going to be around for much longer. They lose Ty Webster, which is bad enough. Then Ed Morrow, Michael Jacobson, 2 guys that would have seen a big role for this team this year transfer. So looking at this, the positives, Glenn Watson is back. He's one of the better guards in the Big Ten. They do bring in 2 solid transfers, and Isaac Copeland from Georgetown, James Palmer Jr. from Miami. Also, Jack McVay is back. After that, though, it's just pretty slim, in my opinion. What's your take on Nebraska, Sean?
I mean, this is Tim Miles' year. I think if he doesn't perform this year, he's gone, and they'll be looking for a new coach. I mean, he's had similar to Pat Chambers, maybe 6 or 7 years to turn this program around, something around there.
I think a little bit less, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and he's had his teams. I mean, he made it to the NCAA tournament that year somehow, but this is going to be his year, and I don't think he'll get it. I mean, Glenn Watson's a talented guy at the point guard, junior. He's been a nice surprise. And then they also bring in Thomas Allen, a 4-star recruit, very good shooter, very good perimeter scorer, will complement Watson well at the guard spot. And then those 2 and then Roby and then Jordy Seminga, 2 front court sophomore players who played very well last year. I mean, this team started out hot last year in conference play. They were like 3-0 or something like that, and people were like, "Oh man, this could be the year Nebraska finally makes it somehow," and didn't cut out so well. So I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, Copeland's a great addition. Transfer from Georgetown, who was a top 25 player coming out of high school. But I mean, I could see a scenario where the Cornhuskers, I mean, their home court, Nebraska basketball fans care about their basketball. They just care about their sports in general, and there's going to be games where that place is absolutely ruckus, and maybe a team like I'm saying Northwestern, this one could come in there and struggle a little bit, and I think they could grab a couple wins. I don't think it'll be enough for them to really be in the NCAA tournament conversation, but my problem for them is just there's so much unproven talent, and I don't know. I mean, you said Tim Miles is a good coach, but I just don't know if he's able to coach these guys up and really make them into a contender in the Big Ten.
I agree. You know, at the top there are some nice pieces, like we said, Copeland and Watson, and I like Jordy Chismanga there. I think he's going to be a solid player for them this year. It's just thin. You know, they just don't have enough Big Ten depth to compete near the top of the league. And I do kind of feel for Tim Miles because, again, I do think he's a good coach. It just hasn't worked out for him at Nebraska, unfortunately. They were horrible last year. I mean, just 303rd in field goal percentage, 300th in three-point percentage. They were 250th in offense overall, 200th in defense. I mean, they just didn't do anything well. So I just don't see much changing this year. Maybe a little bit of an improvement, but where does that get you? You know, so all right, I have Nebraska at 13.
Yeah, I have them exactly there too. I don't think I mean, they got talent, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's enough for them to really compete at the top.
No, me neither. Maybe they can pull out a few wins, like you said, at home, but
yeah,
going to be a rough year for Nebraska. All right, let's move on. Northwestern's up next. So Northwestern last year, as we know, finally gets over the hump. They get into the NCAA tournament, and they actually won a game, which was, I think, really good for the program. You know, Chris Collins has done an outstanding job in just a few years here. So, you know, they return a big chunk of last year's rotation. You know, Brian McIntosh, Scotty Lindsey, Dick Law, Derek Pardon. That's a really, really good top four there for them. You know, and they have an excellent core. You know, also an interesting new piece to me is Anthony Gaines. I've heard a lot of good things about him as well. You know, Aaron Falzone is back. He missed last year with a knee injury. He's a perimeter shooter that can really knock down shots. He's kind of a stretch big. So Collins has plenty of weapons at his disposal. Do you think Northwestern has another big year?
I mean, yeah, I think they could be a top. I think I have them at 3 right now in my rankings. Bryant McIntosh obviously is a big returner, senior guard. This is going to be his moment. He's a stud. I mean, I'm very high on him. He's a great all-around player, can score, distribute, just about anything. And I saw, like, on Twitter the other day, the purple and white scrimmage, Anthony Gaines, the freshman, like you said, is going to be a great scorer. He's going to complement McIntosh very well. And then you got guys like Scotty Lindsey, Vic Law, both Chicago kids, can put the ball in the bucket, can play both sides. They'll definitely be key contributors. And then Pardon, and then even Barrett Benson, I think, could be a factor this year. He came off the bench last year. You could probably recognize him with his big afro, but he'll be a solid player this year. I think he'll be kind of one of those guys in their 4-out, 1-in offense that they'll probably run this year, considering that they're not very big. Like especially with the loss of like Lumpkin and Taphorn, those guys. But I think this Northwestern team, in years past, they were kind of that little Princeton offense, kind of slow, lull you to sleep a little bit, back cuts, all that good stuff. And then this year they're going to be a little quicker and a little more up-tempo, which I think Chris Collins kind of wants to bring that back to Chicago a little bit and bring that Chicago-style up-tempo basketball. And I think he's going to have a team like that that'll fit the bill this year. And I think with the guys like McIntosh and Vic Law, Scotty Lindsey, maybe even Jordan Ash, guy who can come off the bench and contribute, I think they could be a pretty solid team and make their way, probably be a top 4 team. Like I said, I think I had them at number 3. Yeah, number 3 on my rankings, but I could see probably 3 or 4.
Yeah, I have them at 4. One thing I'm a little bit concerned about, and this is a positive with Falzone coming back, is perimeter shooting was a major issue for them last year. They only had one guy shoot over 33% from 3 last year. That was, I believe, Dick Law. He was like at 39. So that's a problem. but I think Falzone will bring some, like I said, perimeter shooting to this roster, which is a good thing. And another thing I wanted to ask you about, and I wanted to get your take on how much of an issue it might be, is, they don't have that home court advantage anymore. They're playing at All-State Arena. Do you think that affects their home court advantage at all?
I mean, I would say so. I mean, it bothered me a little bit, but I mean, you're going to ask like Coach Collins and the players, and they're all going to say like, oh, it's just another game. Like, we're just going to play our game and all that good stuff. But I mean, I think really this team, I don't think they'll be affected by it too much. I mean, there could probably be some games where they're going to be like, oh, geez, we have to take a bus to go to a home game or something like that. But I think in the end, they'll be fine. There should be no worries.
Yeah, I mean, this was a really good defensive team last year. I think they were 35th in the country in scoring defense. So if they can improve on offense, like I said, knock down some shots, I think this is a top 3 or 4 team in conference. I have them at 4, right behind Purdue. So I think that's a good spot. I think they're an NCAA tournament team for without a doubt. All right, let's move on here. Ohio State is up next. So the Thad Matta era is over. I guess it was somewhat of a surprise. I think I was a little bit surprised. I guess, in the back of my mind, I said it could happen. But, the good news is his replacement is excellent, in my opinion, Chris Holtmann. He did such a good job at Butler. He's come in already, recruiting at a high level. This year's group will mostly – I don't think it's as bad as some is what I'm trying to say. They do lose 3 double-digit scorers, Jaquan Lyle, Mark Loving, Trevor Thompson. There are a few solid pieces on this roster. I really like Jay-Sean Tate. Cam Williams is a good scorer. They get Keita Bates-Stop back from an injury. It gets dicey after that, though. I'm kind of worried about point guard play. I'm very worried about their depth. What do you think about Ohio State this year?
Yeah, I mean, Chris Holtmann's definitely done a great job at first, especially with recruiting and stuff. I mean, it's not easy. Thad Matta losing all those guys, kind of that program really restarting, just looking for bodies around the program just to fill a roster. I mean, Jay-Sean Tate and Keita Bates-Diop, they'll be solid. But do I want them to lead my team in scoring? I'm not so sure. I mean, Jay-Sean Tate, don't get me wrong, great player, can put the ball in the bucket, but he's not really someone I want to have the ball in my hands when my team needs a basket. So, and like you said with the backcourt, Andrew Dockich, an Ohio State transfer, how many minutes did he see a game at Michigan? Like nothing, like literally 0. That's a very dark red flag right there. And then Musa Jallo, freshman, being recruited. I mean, he had to reclassify to the 2017 class. He's supposed to be a senior in high school right now. He'll be a solid player, but I don't really know if if he's ready to get big minutes like he will this year, most likely with the lack of depth at the point guard spot or the guard spot. So I mean, that's an area for concern. CJ Jackson showed glimpses last year at the point guard. I don't know how big of a role he'll see this year, but I mean, he'll definitely get big minutes, especially with that lack of backcourt depth. And then Kyle Young's an intriguing freshman, top 50 guy, scorer, shooter. He'll be a solid player to watch. He'll definitely develop into a decent player. He'll get some big minutes this year as a freshman, which will be good for him in the long run, but I don't think Ohio State will have much success this year at all. I mean, they just have bodies at this point. There's not really much talent to go around. I mean, Chris Holtmann's a great coach. I respect what he's doing for that program, what he's doing now, just really building it up from scratch. But I mean, I think really there's just going to be too much to overcome for them to really be relevant this year in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I agree with that. Again, though, I like Holtmann as a coach, so I think, he can get these guys going a little bit. They do have a solid recruiting class, like you said. Kyle Young, Caleb Wesson is another guy that can see time. I think the positive thing, though, is these young guys are going to see a lot of minutes. So definitely, heading into next year, that'll be a good thing. So I have them at 12. You?
Yeah, I had them at 12 exactly.
Okay. All right. Well, up next, we're going to talk about Penn State. Coming off another subpar year, Pat Chambers going into his 7th year at the school. They haven't shown any progress. All you really hear about is these recruiting classes all the time, and you never see anything come of it. So this is a big year for him. You know, I know Penn State basketball is a little bit irrelevant at the school, but I think at some point you got to show some results. So I'm not that excited about this team as many, you know, because they just haven't, you know, shown me in the past few years. You know, they're going to have to show me before I give them any credit is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
They do have a solid group. You know, will they win 15 games again? They'll probably win a little bit more. What's your take on Penn State?
I mean, yeah, I like their backcourt a lot with Tony Carr and Shep Garner. I think that has potential to be one of the more explosive and prolific backcourts in the Big Ten. I just don't know if there'll be enough for them to propel them to the next level. I think they could win a couple games in the Big Ten, don't get me wrong, and maybe be that 9, 10, 11 group. But I don't know. I mean, Lamar Stevens and Mike Watkins, two other very good front court players. I'm not sure how much really they can do. I mean, Stevens played well last year. Watkins was very solid. But I think this Penn State, I think Pat Chambers needs to go. I mean, I respect the guy. He seems like a great dude, knows what he's doing, but he just cannot coach his team. I don't think he's a great fit. And I think Penn State really just doesn't have enough in the tank. I mean, like I said, Garner and Carr are solid players, but I just don't know if they're going to make Penn State relevant again, or ever. Were they ever relevant in basketball?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, when you look at their top 5 guys, you know, Tony Carr, Shep Garner, Lamar Stevens, Mike Watkins, Josh Reeves, to me, those are their top 5. They don't have it, you know, after that, there's not much. So I just don't think they have enough to move up the standings this year. You know, I'd probably put them again in that 10 to 12 range. I have them at 11, you know, to make it fair. So I think Pat Chambers has to go. You know, the guy's 29 and 78 in the Big Ten, you know, since he's been there. So that's just not getting it done. You know, they don't draw any crowds, you know, to their games. You know, it's just not working. I just think he's more of a mid-major level coach. He does recruit well, but, you know, you don't see any results from it. So probably going to struggle again, in my opinion. And I have them at 11. All right. Yeah, so Purdue's up. Yeah. So Purdue's up next. So when you look at Purdue, you know, they bring back pretty much everybody, you know, except for Caleb Swanigan. You know, Vince Edwards, really good. Isaac Haas, Matthias, Carson Edwards, etc. But, you know, you have to factor in, you know, the best player in college basketball in my mind last year was Caleb Swanigan. He's gone. Averages 18 and 12. So, again, I really like this group. My only real big concern is how do they adjust to playing without Swanigan? You know, the keys for me are Isaac Haas. You know, can he be a consistent big, you know, at the Big Ten level? You know, he played 19 minutes a game last year. He was very productive. You know, he averaged 12 and 5. But can he be like a 27 to 30-minute guy? You know, can he do that? That's the key for me. But, you know, I really like this group. You know, they pretty much return everybody, like I said, except for Swanigan. So what's your take on Purdue this year?
I mean, Isaac Haas, him and Swanigan, let's face it, they did not really play well together. I mean, I would say Haas, the problem with I get it. Like, sometimes the refs kind of bailed the guards out, the guys that were attacking him, kind of were a little lenient on giving fouls to him. But, I mean, it is what it is. But he's really got to step up this year. I mean, he's 7'2", like 270 pounds. That dude, he's got to make an impact somehow. He's got to be a difference maker. He's gonna be the big guy down there. He's got to do something. I think the key this year overall will be Carson Edwards. He was a top 100 guy going into his freshman year, I believe. He was supposed to be pretty solid. I mean, he was for parts of the year, but he really didn't have that breakout game or that breakout moment that made you say, like, wow, this kid's going to be a stud, like, in the future. I mean, he played well for the USA U19 team this summer, but can he carry that over to the college level? We'll see. I think he can, but it'll be interesting to see how he plays. And then Dakota Matthias and Vincent Edwards, two kind of glue guys in a way. Dakota Matthias obviously won Defensive Player of the Year last year in the Big Ten. He's very solid, can do a little bit of both on defense and offense. Can shoot the three very well, along with Ryan Klein, who will be another solid three-point shooter, role player coming off the bench. And then Vincent Edwards, kind of another type of glue guy, very athletic, can rebound, score. He needs to have a big year this too. He'll probably play some front court along with Haas, but I mean, it'll be interesting. I mean, PJ Thompson, that guy does not turn the ball over. He's got like glue to his hands or something when it comes to the ball. But he'll be solid this year too. I think he could be a great point guard. He's not really known to be one of those flashy, high scoring, prolific point guards, but he's just a guy that knows how to get the job done, the boiler way, as they say. So I mean, he'll be good. He fits that program's mentality perfectly. And I think this Purdue team, just a big question for me is how can they replace Swanigan? I mean, I know Isaac Haas, he's a man child. I realize that, but can he do what Caleb Swanigan did last year? I mean, Caleb Swanigan, obviously, you don't see many of those guys. Those guys don't really come around often. But Isaac Haas, he doesn't have to be a Caleb Swanigan. He's just got to be a guy that can be relied on to finish down low, grab rebounds, guard the big guys down low, limit defense or paint touches for the other bigs, and just do his job down there. That's all he has to do. But he gets in foul trouble too much. So, I mean, if he can stay out of foul trouble and all that, I think he could be a very dangerous factor for them. I think Purdue could not repeat, but I think they could be a top 4, top 3 team in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, Haas has bad hands, which is not good for a big man. So that's something that's concerning to me. I feel like Vince Edwards is a guy that could possibly be an all Big Ten first teamer. I really believe that. Maybe even a player of the year caliber guy. I mean, obviously, I think Bridges is the guy, but I think with Swanigan out of the way, this is kind of his team now to lead and score, be their main scorer. Also, they're a really good perimeter shooting team as well. They were top 10 in the country last year, 40% as a team. The guy you mentioned that I really like is Dakota Mathias. He doesn't get credit, for all the things he does. Averaged 10 points a game last year, 4 rebounds, 4 assists almost, 45% from 3. He's a really valuable guy. When you have good point guard play, PJ Thompson not turning the ball over, that's such an X factor for a team, when you just don't turn the ball over. And Carson Edwards, he scored 30 points in their scrimmage the other day, so that's a pretty good sign. So I think this team is a top 3 team in the Big Ten. I have them at 3 behind Minnesota and Michigan State. So, I think that was a good take by you. The improvement of Carson Edwards, if he can take that next step, this team could be pretty good. So Purdue, do you have them at 3 or 4?
I think I have them at 4 behind Northwestern.
All right, that's a pretty solid spot. I have them one step above. I have Northwestern at 4. So let's move on here. Okay, so we're going to talk about Rutgers. I'll say this. I think they have a bright future, possibly. I like the hire, Steve Pickiel. I think you're already kind of seeing a difference in attitude. So it'll be this year or maybe even next year when you see some results. Probably not till next year, at least. I didn't really say that right. But I do think they have a shot, with Steve Pickiel at the helm. They did buy in on the defensive end last year. They were like 56 in the country, so that's a good sign. But this roster just isn't ready to compete, even in the middle of the Big Ten. Any take on Rutgers?
Well, I mean, I know John Crispin during media day was like, oh my goodness, like you guys are really turning that Rutgers basketball program around after one season. I'm like, dude, have you seen their non-conference play? Like, those are easy W's, like all around. I mean, yeah, I get it. Like they're trying to. I mean, it's cool to see Rutgers win again, I guess. I mean, they're never really relevant to me in the Big Ten, but I mean, they could be in a couple years. I mean, Corey Sanders Jr., very explosive point guard, arguably one of the best in the Big Ten. Kind of stinks he got on kind of a low end of the stick with going to Rutgers, but I mean, his choice. He's a solid player. Him and Mike Williams will be solid in the backcourt. I think they could snag probably 12 wins in their non-conference play and then maybe 3 or 4. I mean, they won 3 last year in conference play. I think they'll probably do the same again, and they'll probably have a similar record to what they had last year. But I mean, you said it. Pickel's making this program kind of relevant again. He seems to be very hyped up about his job, bringing this program back to relevancy. It'll be interesting to see what they do in the future, but yeah, I don't think they're really going to have a chance this year in the Big Ten. I have them big last.
Yeah, I have them at 14 as well. Like I said, I just saw a little bit different attitude from the players. They look like they bought in. I think they like playing for Pickiel, so that's a good sign. Corey Sanders, solid player. Mike Williams, Deshaun Freeman's really good up front. But they just don't have the roster. They need time to build the roster, and it's going to take at least another 2 recruiting classes to me to show any results per se. So Rutgers, I still think they'll probably win between 14 and 16 games, same type of season last year. So they're probably the bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten this year. All right, so we're going to finish it up tonight with Wisconsin. So the Badgers are coming off as, I would say, solid year. They won 27 games. They got to the Sweet 16. This might be the year, though, where they don't see the NCAA tournament. They lose 4 starters, and 2 of those guys in Koenig and Hayes were such a huge part of that program for so long. Those 2 guys are going to be really hard to replace. To me, behind Ethan Happ, there's just too many question marks for me to consider this team a tournament team. As good as he is, there's a lot of young guys who are going to have to step up for everything to click. A few guys I'm keeping my eye on, obviously, Demetric Trice. I thought he played last year well in a small role. He was impressive. Brevin Pritzel, I think, is a guy that's going to have to play well for them. But like guys like Khalil Iverson, Alex Hillikanen, those guys are role players. Like, I just don't see them taking that next step. I think some are banking on, Trice, Pritzel to suddenly be impact guys, and I just don't know if I'm sold on that. Greg Gard can certainly coach, but what's your take on the Badgers?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it a little bit earlier in the podcast, saying this is Greg Gard's team now. I mean, Bo Ryan's recruits are gone. He's going to have to coach his guys, his recruits, the guys he wanted to come to this program. I mean, Ethan Happ's a good start. Don't get me wrong. He's a great player. Feel good story. Really a no-name recruit coming out of high school, developed, is now arguably one of the best players in the Big Ten. Will he be the best player in the Big Ten? I don't know about that. He's definitely up there, though. He'll be the top player this year for Wisconsin. Khalil Iverson, another guy, I mean, was solid last year, but he was a role player. He's not really a guy who's going to stand out and really can lead a team in scoring or rebounding or anything like that. I mean, you're right. You said it. Wisconsin, they're a bunch of role guys, but I mean, in years past, haven't we seen that Wisconsin, the reason they win is because they don't have big name guys or anything like that. I mean, Frank Kaminsky, obviously, but these guys develop into very good players and they all fit a role, and that's what makes them special. I mean, you're right. Talent-wise, I don't see them making an impact, but I mean, the way Wisconsin basketball has worked in years past is they understand their role and they gel well together, and I think they could find a way to do that this year. Will they be as successful in years past? No, I don't think so. I could see them being a 6 or 7 team, maybe even 8. But I think people are saying talent-wise, obviously Wisconsin is not very – no names jump out. But I think as a whole, just them playing together and playing their roles is what is going to make them a team that could compete this year in the Big Ten. Right.
That's a good point. And that's why don't get me wrong. I do not count Wisconsin out ever. Even this year, look, I'm just looking at the roster, seeing what they're having, and I make my opinion. So I wouldn't be shocked if they're a tournament team because, they seem to figure it out year after year. This year, I just don't see it. They have some guys every year that step up, and I say, oh, I really like this kid. I think he could step up, and they do. This year, I'm not sure they have that. Last year, okay, if I can just go back last year, they weren't your regular Wisconsin team, and I think this shows you how good Hayes and Koenig were, that they won 27 games and they got to Sweet 16. They turned the ball over like crazy. They were a horrible free throw shooting team. They just weren't that great numbers-wise, and I just think it shows you how important and valuable Hayes and Koenig were, and they're gone. So that's just a big X factor for me. Hap can't do it alone. I have them at 9. I mean, I've seen them anywhere between 7 and 9 preseason. What about you?
Yeah, I have them at 8. And I like your point, what you said. They don't really have – I mean, Hap, yeah, he can score the ball, but they don't really have a guy that can step up and hit that big shot like Bronson Koenig could. And that's going to be an issue for them. So, yeah, I have them 8 or 9. I think, yeah, I have them at 8.
Sean, I can't tell you right now who their second leading scorer is going to be.
Oh, yeah. I have
no idea.
I could tell you, I could say Khalil Iverson right now, but he only averaged, 3 points a game last year?
3.5.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be Trice, it could be Pritzel, it could be Iverson, it could be one of the newcomers. I don't know. But we'll find that out, in the first few weeks of the season.
So many question marks. You're right.
So many. So I mean, I can't see why anybody would get upset if I have them, that low in the rankings. It's just because of their history, because they always seem to figure it out. But at some point, you're not going to figure it out. You're not going to have the bodies to compete at the top. So, All right, that wraps up our team breakdowns tonight. We're going to finish up tonight with some. We'll have some fun. Give our picks. All right, Sean. So go ahead. Who's your player of the year? It's probably not surprising, but go ahead.
I mean, you got me, Miles Bridges. I think he's just so talented. Last year he kind of got a rough end of the stick a little bit coming in, and really had to be expected to take the program to new heights. Very high expectations. I mean, I think the expectations are even higher this year, but I think he has guys around him that will complement him well, and he'll be a very solid player. Probably average close to 20 points a game. I think he'll take Michigan State to the national championship. I'm not predicting a win right now, but they'll definitely be the top team in the Big Ten this year. And I think Miles Bridges will be a big reason for that.
And now here's a question I have, okay? And this is my only concern. Now, obviously, I'm picking Bridges too. I think he's the best player in the conference, and he deserves to be there. But with all the weapons they have this year, do you think that could hurt his numbers? And maybe put him back towards the pack a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, but yeah, I could see something happen like that. I think Josh Langford will see an increase in his numbers this year, which could probably take away a little bit. And Jaren Jackson being there too. Yeah, I could see his numbers decreasing a little bit, but I think that will make him more consistent and really lets him gel. And I think he's at his best when he's not trying to do too much. So I think,
right.
I mean, yeah, his numbers will go down, but I think his field goal percentage and his production will increase.
Okay. And I think obviously the other guy you have to mention is Ethan Happ. If Wisconsin figures things out and makes the NCAA tournament again, he's going to be in that mix as well. I mean, he's an All-American talent, so he's certainly going to be in the mix for Player of the Year. All right, so who's your pick for Coach of the Year, Sean?
Coach of the Year, man, I hate to say it, but got to say Tom Izzo too. I think this Michigan State team, obviously they're the favorite for sure to win Conference of the Year. I think Tom Izzo, this is his year that finally gets his national championship after so much. He's had so many talented teams from Draymond Green, Adrian Payne, all those guys, Drew Netzel, even him. And now this team is going to be the one that takes it over the edge and finally gets that NCAA championship, possibly. But this is his best chance, and I think this is the team to do it, and I think he's going to win Coach of the Year.
Yeah, I could see that happening. I'm actually going to go with Fran McCaffrey because I really, really like this Iowa team. It's a team I'm most excited about in conference. So I think if they can creep up into that top 4 or 5 and really turn things around, then I think Fran has definitely got a great shot to win that award. But obviously, Tom Izzo is a great pick as well. Who is your newcomer of the year, Sean?
I was going to do a clean sweep and say Jaren Jackson, but just changed it to Luka Garza. It's a bold prediction. No bias here, but I think Luka's going to have a great year. Obviously, he played well in the Europe trip against very bad competition, but still, I mean, I think he's going to be, I wouldn't say dominant this year, but he's going to find a role that fits him well at Iowa. He's definitely got pieces around him that will complement him very well, and I think he'll be a great player this year. I mean, don't get me wrong, Jaren Jackson, very talented player, probably a one and done. Would not be surprised, but I think Luka's numbers, I was going to find a way to utilize him a lot more than Jackson will be at Michigan State. So in the end, I had to go with Luka.
Okay, yeah, Luka actually played great on their foreign trip, I believe, as well. So that was definitely a good sign for Iowa. I'm going to go with Jaren Jackson, 5-star guy. I think he's going to make a big impact at Michigan State. A couple other guys, though, I think we need to mention are the transfers coming in. Jaron Simmons, Mark Allstork. Those guys could put up big numbers and maybe be in that discussion as well. But I'm going to stick with Jackson. And we've already talked about this. Your champ is Michigan State, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, me too. Again, I think we both agree they're on another level. So let me ask you one more question before we get out of here, Sean. So if you had to predict today I know it's hard, obviously, but what do you think about NCAA bids for this conference?
NCAA bids, man, I'd have to go with 7 or 8. I want to say 8 because I feel like Wisconsin could maybe find a way to slip in there. But if I had my life on it right now, I'd probably put 7 with Michigan State, Minnesota, Northwestern, Purdue, Iowa, Michigan, Maryland, those teams. I just feel like they're the safe bet right now. But I could see if Wisconsin finds a way to silence the haters and really put together a good season with a lot of question marks surrounding their program, I think the Big Ten could get 8 bids this year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think right now it's a firm 7, but then a team maybe like Wisconsin or Indiana. I'm not as.
I like your thinking.
I'm higher than on Indiana than some, so I think it'll be 7, and then maybe Wisconsin and Indiana could creep in there as well. I think it's going to be a really tough conference, as it always is. I think sometimes it gets a bad rap because it's just competitive. It's tough every night in the Big Ten. So definitely fun year ahead. Sean, I really appreciate you joining tonight. Again, guys, you can check Sean out on BT Powerhouse. It's a really interesting Big Ten site. Also, Zag's blogs and sports. Was it Sports U?
Student Sports or Student Union Sports, I think.
Student Union Sports. All right, and Sean's at Sean. Give him your Twitter handle as well, buddy.
Sean_Bock_4. Hit me up with any criticism or anything you want.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining tonight. I really appreciate it. I'll be back in a couple days with another episode. We'll do another breakdown. Also, I got a really cool interview with a coach coming up. I'm going to talk to Jace Hurl on Wednesday night from Colorado State Assistant, so that should be a fun conversation. And then again on Thursday, we'll be back with another breakdown. So we'll talk to you guys later. And this is the College Hoop News Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Patelis. Thanks a lot. See you later.